First of all, the ceasefire is a huge defeat for Israel. It's really quite remarkable. At the end of the ceasefire, the Israelis have agreed to leave Gaza. They will leave Gaza completely.
Well, maybe also a little bit about the conflict between Israel and Hamas, because I know you guys have opposing opinions on that one. Because, John, you've said on multiple occasions that Israel's committing genocide. Is that correct?
Oh, sure. I mean, Amnesty International has said that. Human Rights Watch has said that. The International Court of Justice has said that there is evidence to make a plausible case at this point in time. All sorts of individuals have said that. Omer Bartov, who is an Israeli himself and who's one of the leading scholars on the Holocaust, has said that. I do believe it's a genocide. And if it's not a genocide, it's mass murder.
That's based on what exactly, John? On which data? Because the data are coming from, Hamas and from out of Gaza. So how can we trust them? How do we know that this is actually taking place?
Oh, I think that the data which is coming out from Hamas underestimates the numbers. The New York Times just had a big story. The Hamas numbers are actually too low. Furthermore, you, I think, should look at the Amnesty International report. You should look at the Human Rights report, these two reports on Israeli genocide. Those reports are filled with data that make the argument that this is a genocide. This is not a superficial charge that these prestigious human rights organizations are making. These are well-documented studies. And furthermore, if you look at the brief that the South African government filed before the International Court of Justice, this was in December of 2023, late December 2023, it's filled with evidence to support the charge. But if you don't want to call it genocide, that's fine. What do you call it? Mass murder? Is that your term? What's the term?
No, it depends probably on where you start. If you start from the from the idea that Israel has the right to defend itself, and that the October 7th was a massacre and was a disaster, and Israel had to react, and and that fighting an urban war against a guerrilla or terrorist organization that hides in. Between civilians, it's a very difficult task, isn't it? And then you risk also hitting civilians and killing civilians. And I mean, as a realist, probably this is a fact that I would accept, that urban war, this comes with urban warfare, where terrorists are hiding between civilians in schools, in basements, in hospitals. And but let me ask you, how do you fight a war like this without also killing civilians and hurting civilians?
Well, Veer, just on the point that Israel has the right to defend itself, especially given what happened on October 7th, nobody denies that. Right? Of course it has the right to defend itself. Every country has the right to defend itself. But that's not an interesting issue. The question is how you go about defending yourself. Just because you're attacked and you're defending yourself doesn't give you the right to execute a genocide. I think you would surely agree with that. Well, the question here
But how do you go after Hamas then?
Well, you go to great lengths to concentrate on targeting Hamas and doing what you can to minimize civilian casualties. And if you look at what the Israelis have been saying, and if you look at what they have been doing, they're not interested in minimizing civilian casualties. They're interested in maximizing civilian casualties. And they're basically interested in driving the Palestinians out of Gaza. This is an ethnic cleansing exercise. And what the Israelis thought they could do was they thought they could murder large numbers of Palestinians and drive them out of Gaza. And they thought they could starve them to death and use that as an instrument for driving them out of Gaza as well. If you look at the damage they have inflicted on Gaza, it goes well beyond the claim that they were interested in going after Hamas, and that this is just collateral damage. They've destroyed virtually every university or college in Gaza. They've been tearing up cemeteries. They've been destroying libraries and mosques. They've been shooting up hospitals. There are hardly any functioning hospitals in Gaza. They've not been letting in aid in the form of food, gas, and water, and medicine in anywhere near the sufficient amounts to keep large chunks of the population.
Well, there's different stories on the aid getting in or not getting in, and and by whom is sabotaging the aid getting in. So there's different narratives on what's happening.
There's an Israeli narrative, and then there's the narrative from all the people in the United Nations and the aid groups that are in there as to what's happening. And those two narratives that are at odds. And the question is, who do you believe? And I wouldn't believe the Israelis.
Well, I would not intend to believe UNRWA, which is, also collaborating with Hamas. So there's, let's say that we disagreeing on parts of this story, probably.
Well, it's not just UNRWA. It's all sorts of aid organizations that are in there who say that the Israelis are making it almost impossible to get the essential foodstuffs and medicine and water and gas or fuel into Gaza.
But anyway, we agree, of course, on that. That's a disaster what's happening over there, and there will be, like any conflict, there will be an end to this conflict also by negotiations. We see this perhaps happening now. But what kind of future will Gaza have? What kind of future will the Palestinians have after this war? And where will it be? I mean, where will the Palestinians live?
Well, I think there are two dimensions to this. One is we should talk a bit about the ceasefire, and that's now being negotiated, and it looks like it will be implemented on Sunday. And then we should talk about the long term, whether the ceasefire holds or not. First of all, the ceasefire is a huge defeat for Israel. It's really quite remarkable. At the end of the ceasefire, the Israelis have agreed to leave Gaza. They will leave Gaza completely. Furthermore, Hamas has not been defeated. And in fact, there are all sorts of articles in the Israeli press, that say that Hamas has reconstituted itself, and it is as formidable a fighting force today as it was at the start of the war on October 7th. This is really quite remarkable.
But it's difficult to believe also.
Pardon?
This is also difficult to believe. Where will they get their weapons from? I mean, there's thousands of them killed. The system of tunnels is, at least a big part, has been destroyed. So how can Hamas be the formidable force that they were before this all started?
You can go to the Jerusalem Post. You can go to the Israel Times. You can listen to Tony Blinken talk. And they basically said what I just said to you. This is not something I've made up. Right?
I understand. It's the Israeli newspaper, the Israeli media who's saying this. Yeah. But I think for us, it's difficult to believe, to state this as a fact.
Why should it be difficult for you to believe? There are huge numbers of young males in Gaza, and you can kill a couple thousand Hamas fighters, and there are plenty of young males who can replace them. In terms of the weaponry it's involved, Hamas relies on unsophisticated weapons. It's not like they have tanks and airplanes, right? They rely on anti-tank weapons. They rely on rifles, explosive devices, and so forth and so on. And they have plenty of them. They can build them inside of Gaza. And furthermore, there's all sorts of evidence that there's lots of unexploded Israeli ordnance lying around in Gaza that Hamas is using to make bombs that are very effective against the Israelis. So the argument that people are making, and again, this is not me, this is people inside of Israel who are loyal to the government, that Hamas is in very good shape today. But again, it's not only that, it's the fact that the ceasefire agreement, assuming that it's implemented, calls for Israel to leave, to abandon the Philadelphia corridor, which is the line between Gaza and Egypt that the Israelis have said they have to occupy for the long term. Now they've agreed to leave. They've agreed to allow food and other kinds of aid to come in. They've allowed Palestinians to return to their homes, which means that the effort to ethnically cleanse North Gaza, which looked like it was going to happen a few weeks ago, is not going to happen because all those people.
What happened? What made the Israelis do this? Agree with this?
Trump?
No, well, I think Trump mattered for sure. But the other thing is the Israeli army is in real trouble, right? The fact is the Israelis, number one, cannot defeat Hamas in Gaza, right? Number two, they have been suffering severe casualties in Gaza. Third, the Israeli army is in real trouble. They're having great difficulty getting reservists to report for duty. Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, had a big story on this the other day, the state of the Israeli army, and you see it in other media outlets in Israel as well. The army is in trouble. Remember, the army is in Syria, the army is in southern Lebanon, the army is in Gaza. This is an army that's not used to fighting long wars. It's not constituted to fight long wars, and it's been fighting in Gaza since October 7th, 2023, and it's, again, now involved in other places like Syria and southern Lebanon as well. So the army is running out of gas, and Hamas is alive and well. So it makes sense from Israel's point of view to cut a deal, and that's what they've done. But that's just the short term. The question is, what's the long term? And the long term is Israel will continue to exist as an apartheid state. And the problem that it faces is that more people around the world understand that Israel is an apartheid state, and they also understand that Israel has executed a genocide, or if you want to use your view of it, mass murder.